Hello everyone, welcome back. I want to take an updated look at what's going on with China and Russia. Okay, it's been a while since we've looked at this. So the way I like to analyze large global events is sometimes not by looking at the information that's available directly, but rather at the shadow that information creates, right? And the reason is because we never get all of the information, right? So the information is always limited, compromised, false. So I like to look at what's, what the results are, and that kind of helps me figure out what's actually going on. And the example that I like to use is, if we look at World War I, World War II, right? What I do is, okay, look at, because to me, World War I, World War II is like one big war with a small break in between. So prior to World War I, the United States and Great Britain were enemies. Okay, it's going back to the Civil War, where there was a possibility that the British were going to support the South and break up the United States. So that kind of continued all the way up to just before World War I. The United States basically, hated Britain for that. And also hated the fact that they were a world power, and if at all possible, they would have liked to stop Britain from being a world power, and particularly to cut Britain off from their colonies, right? Because that's where Britain was getting a lot of this power from, right? Because they had a colonial empire around the world, okay? So going into World War I, we know that the United States wanted to stop Britain from being a world war power. And then at the beginning of World War I, we can see that the United States is trading with both Britain and the Germans. Okay, so they're basically arming both sides, right? Selling arms to both sides. It seems like they were trying to actually instigate a fight between the two of them. Okay, and then we see the United States basically delays entry into World War I. A whole bunch of excuses why they came up with it. And then, ultimately, when you look at the end of this, which is when you look at what comes out of the end of World War II, we see that the United States accomplishes its goal of knocking out Britain as the world power, breaking up its colonies, and essentially taking its place as a world superpower. Okay, so again, I look at the shadow that is cast. What did the United States want prior to World War I and World War II? What came out of it at the end? And that's how I kind of figure out. Basically everything is going to lead to that end goal. Okay, so when we look at China, right? We're going to look at China. We're going to look at Russia. First, look at China, and every day in the news we hear that China is our enemy. There's a potential war looming with China, and the first thing I look at is say, wait a second, we're still trading with China. Okay. You don't trade with an enemy, right? You trade with allies. So if we're trading with China, they can't possibly be an enemy, okay? So again, looking beyond what the news is telling us and looking at the shadow that's being cast by what's actually happening, we are trading with China. Now, first, let's talk about trade for a second, because a lot of people will say, well, we're losing this trade war with China, okay? And how do they come to that conclusion? Well, because there's more US dollars going out of the United States to China versus going from China into the United States. Okay, so when you look at this from dollars point of view, it looks like we're losing this trade war with China, right? But then you stop and say, hey, wait a second, what are these US dollars? First of all, it's basically electronic money that's created in computers, right? What value does it have? Whatever value the U.S. government wants it to have, okay? And they can control the value of it by basically controlling the money supply. So the U.S. government controls the money supply. So without getting too deep into why money has any value at all, let's get money out of the equation, right? And let's basically look at this from a barter point of view, okay? If we were bartering with China, right? So would we want more valuable things coming into the United States, or do we want more valuable things going out of the United States, okay? So we don't want valuable things going out of the United States. We want valuable things coming going only in one direction, going into the United States. Okay, all right. So that's how you, in reality, gauge your trading success, not in terms of dollars, right? Which is something that's created, okay, and controlled by government. Look at the goods, okay. So let's take a look at those goods for a second, right? So when we look at the goods, we see there's three main categories of goods that I see being traded with China: technology, food, and comfort of living stuff. Okay. All right. So first of all, let's look at the food. Okay. So food is a really good thing to trade, right? Because or rather the excess food. So you grow enough food for your population, and then the excess gets traded because basically you're giving away grass, let's say, right? You're giving away something that you're able to grow more of, okay? So that's a good thing to trade, right? Bring in valuable things and give away grass or food or corn, or, you know. So it is definitely to our benefit to trade out food, right? Because if you don't trade it out, eventually it goes bad, right? The worms and maggots and stuff like that get into it and start eating it. So you want to get rid of the excess food, right? You can only store so much of it. Okay. So we're winning on the side of trading out food. We win on that. Okay. Now let's talk about technology for a second, right? So everybody's very focused on, hey, we're sending out all this technology, and the Chinese are stealing it. And they're infringing on the copyrights and the intellectual rights and all that kind of crap. And it's like, you know something, if we didn't want the Chinese to have it, we wouldn't be sending it out to them, okay? So let's look at technology for a second, right? One of the things that, for example, we trade, I know that, Michael Bloomberg, right? Big Democrat donor, right? He became a billionaire doing business with China, okay? So what does he sell them, right? Well, he sells them these computers that essentially run their financial systems, right? That's his business, right? He sells his computers to run their financial systems. So if you wanted, if all of China's economy runs on Bloomberg's computers, if you wanted to crash their financial systems, you don't think that they've got programs within those computer systems to crash it, right? To manipulate it, to turn it off, or make the numbers go in whatever direction they want them to go. So if you're trading out technology, right, you've got a lot of control over what that technology does. Okay. So again, I think that when they say that, oh, we're trading out this technology and we're losing on that deal, I think all that technology is basically corrupted. Okay, those are just strings to pull them by and control them by. Okay, because it doesn't, like, again, looking at the big picture, it doesn't make sense to sell valuable technology, right, or to give away valuable technology. It does make sense to give away technology that will help you control the other side. Okay, so that's my thoughts on giving away the technology. I think there's a reason why they're doing it. They're making it seem like they don't want to do it, like their arms are being twisted to do it. But I think they're giving away this technology, selling this technology in order to control them better, okay? Now, comfort of living stuff, right? All the stuff that comes into this country, like, I don't know, like this thing I'm holding over here, like this board, like all this stuff around here. All right, so all this stuff like this is basically created by Chinese slave labor, okay? So we don't have slavery, we don't have cheap labor here in the United States, right? So what we do is we basically in terms export the slavery, right? So we're using the Chinese as slaves to make all this stuff for us real cheap. So that's kind of how I see it. If all the stuff that comes from China was being made here, we wouldn't be able to afford all this stuff. Okay, so we're taking advantage of the cheap Chinese labor, and if you really want to, basically look at the standard of living, right? So getting the money out of this consideration, because the money can be manipulated. Look at the standard of living of most people in the United States versus most of the people in China. Because I think even like the poorest person here in the United States has a cell phone, okay, and a television, okay. So I don't think that's the case with the poorest people in China or other places around the world. Okay, so we're winning on the comfort of living, we're winning on food, and I'm pretty sure that we're winning on technology because we're sending them stuff. Okay, I think in order to control them. Okay, because the thing with technology is like if you don't fully understand the technology, that technology can be used against you. Okay, because they don't know what's in that technology that's going over there, okay? Or maybe they're trying to figure it out, but again, there's a reason why they're importing it rather than building it themselves, okay? It's probably not that easy for them to build or to copy, and if that's the case, then they probably aren't going to be able to find all the bugs that are in it there to spy on them and control them, okay? And everybody makes a big deal of, or not a big deal, but everybody points out how TikTok is being used by the Chinese to, basically collect, data mine Americans, okay? Well, what do you think is happening with all the stuff that's going on, all the technology that's being sent over there, okay? So spying works in both directions. I think that there's a lot more spying that the United States does and controlling the United States does on China, okay? So, let's move on from that. Let's talk about bribes, okay? Because everybody makes a big deal, and it is a big deal, but everybody focuses on the fact that the Bidens are compromised. They've been getting money from China, from all over the world. But don't lose sight of the fact that the CIA is the bribe master of the world, okay? They've probably been bribing Chinese officials and Chinese businessmen going all the way back to the 70s, okay? So we just see the Biden side of this, right? What we're not seeing is all the bribing that the CIA and other agencies, NSA, are doing in China, okay? And the CIA is so far as far as I know, is the bribe master of the world. And I remember back during the Iraq War, right? What they were openly saying, hey, what's the CIA doing in Iraq? What's their function? Like, hey, we're going around spreading as much money as we can, buying up everybody. Okay, so that's the Iraq War. I don't know, whatever, a decade or two ago. So yeah, the CIA that's their business, right? CIA doesn't do James Bond kind of stuff. Okay, CIA buys people. Okay, that's their business. Okay, so next let's take a look at. Okay, wait. So what's going on here? Why? Because it seems to me like there's all this focus on the China being a potential threat to Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, India. Okay, what's going on with that? And again, looking at the shadow that this is creating, we're trading with China. All right. So again, we're trading with them. That's an ally. Okay. So what's going on with the threat side, right? It seems to me, right, that if our ally, right, our trading ally, is threatening these, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, India, it seems to me that we are using China to control Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, India. Okay. Now on the side of India, attempting to control them, because I think the Indians are a little wise to what the United States is trying to do, and have said that they're basically, they're are very keen and aware of what's in their best interest versus what's in the United States' best interest. And they know that the United States is trying to play them against China. But at the same time, okay, China and India are real enemies, right? They've actually had minor shooting war skirmishes at the border. They've got land disputes. They've got water right disputes, right? Because what China at one point is to the north, and what they're doing is the water apparently flows from the north to the south. So, or there's a couple of rivers where the water is flowing, let's say from China down to India, and the Chinese have been basically stealing the water, diverting it, so that the Indian farmers can't have the water that they've had for many centuries to plant and farm. So there is a real there's a real dispute here between China and India, and something I said going back 20 years is if there's going to be a world war, it is going to start between China and India, because you got like more than 1 billion people in China, more than 1 billion people in India. These guys are right next to each other, bumping elbows. If you want to instigate people to go to war, those are the two people that you're going to push and prod to go to war against each other if you want to have a real war, okay? So that's what's going on with all this stuff. And I think that the United States is using China to basically keep Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and India under their control, okay? So that's the Chinese side, okay? That's, again, looking at the shadow that the current events are casting, okay? Again, the key thing here is that you don't trade with an enemy, you trade with an ally, and everything else is gonna flow from that, okay? Let's take a look at the Russia side here, right? What's going on over there? Again, looking at the shadow that the current events are casting. Well, who's benefited the most out of this war between Russia and Ukraine? Well, what's the result of it? Europe is scared shitless and has basically run back to the United States for protection, right? Under NATO. NATO is all of a sudden a thing, right? We hadn't heard of NATO for about 2 decades. All of a sudden, the NATO alliance is the big thing. Okay? Everybody wants to be part of NATO, right? So, the United States is using Russia, right, to control Europe. Okay, that's the big shadow that's being cast here, right? When we look at the shadow cast by these current events. So, what's going on in Ukraine? A gigantic war game, right, with live fire. That's what's going on over there. Okay, I didn't realize exactly why, but I thought it was very odd when the United States basically, when the United States got out of Afghanistan as quickly as they did. And, now I know why. The reason why they got out of Afghanistan is because they say, oh, wait a second, we're sitting here, we've blown up everything in Afghanistan and in Iraq. That's interesting. But there's this potential new war looming in Ukraine that's going to be a lot more interesting, with a lot more things to blow up, a lot more missiles that we can test out, and new war toys that we can test out. So this Ukraine war, I believe, is being driven by the U.S. military-industrial complex. They love developing and testing new weapons out, and Ukraine is the place to do that right now. Okay. I believe that, first of all, the United States, right, CIA, they bribe everybody around the world. All elections that are capable of being corrupted, they corrupt. This guy Zelensky that was elected, I'm sure that was a rigged election to get Zelensky elected, because they knew that Zelensky would do stuff to cause Ukraine and Russia to have a war. Okay, so I think that was this war is everything going according to plan. Okay, that's what this seems like. Okay, so this Ukrainian war, it's a gigantic war game with live fire to test out the new weapons to drive the Europeans into the hands of the United States, right? Now, what about this threat of a nuclear war? This becoming like, what are the chances of the United States actually attacking? The chance of Russia attacking the United States with these hypersonic missiles that every so often we are reminded about. Well, again, CIA is the bribe master of the world. They had already established them in the 70s, or themselves as the 70s. They were bribing people in the old Soviet Union, which was pretty tough. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, right, there was that period, between, I think, the Gorbachev, Yellen period over there, especially that Yellen period. I'm sure that the CIA basically rushed into Russia, or whatever it was at that point, Russia, ex-Soviet Union, and bribed everyone, bought everyone, okay? So all these hypersonic missiles that everybody keeps referring to, okay, who built those missiles? The people that the CIA bribed back in the 90s and early 2000s. That's who built those hypersonic missiles, okay? So all those missiles, right, all that advanced technology that the Russians supposedly have, it's been built by people that the United States bribed, and I would bet dollars to donuts that there's code, all right, in these missiles, in all these advanced weapons that can be controlled by the United States, right? Either to get them to, like, for example, if the Russians were to launch a missile towards the United States, there's effectively a homing beacon in there to tell them exactly when and where to shoot it down, or a turn off switch or whatever. But any technology that has been developed in Russia, okay, was developed by people that the United States bought, okay, after the Soviet Union collapsed, okay? So those are the people that developed that technology, and I'm pretty sure that the Russians are fully aware of this, which is why they are absolutely not going to hit that button to launch any missiles in the direction of the United States, because they know that all that technology is flawed and compromised, and they don't know to what extent, but they just know that everyone in that country has been bribed and bought, compromised, okay? So that's why there's like zero chance that this could ever escalate to a war between the United States, or nuclear war between the United States and Russia, because, first of all, the Russians dismantled a lot of their nuclear weapons after the fall of the Soviet Union, right? And not the smartest thing they ever did, but they did, right? Why? Because the United States bribed them to do so. All right. So everything that's technological in Russia is compromised. Is bought. It cannot be. Putin knows he can't rely on anything. Okay. Other than AK-47s that aren't run by computers. Okay. So basically, the Russian, all of Russia has been bribed. All the technology is flawed. Okay. Well, let me skip down to the deal, right? There was a deal made here, right? Whether it was formal or informal. The deal, I think, is that the United States, through some channel, told the Russians that they can go into Ukraine and do whatever they want as long as they keep the war conventional, okay? Zelensky was put there specifically because they wanted this war. Zelensky was put in Ukraine to basically instigate this war, to do things that would cause the Russians to want to invade. So they finally got the war that they wanted to, and the Russians fully aware that the United States is supporting Ukraine, and basically what's happening here is if the United States is sending weapons to Ukraine, so the Ukrainians can fight the Russians. It's pretty much the same as if the United States is fighting Russia. Okay, so but the thing is, it's not a real war. It's a war game because there are rules to this. Right, the rules are that the Russians can't go nuclear. They've probably been told that they got to keep it confined to certain to that country, or maybe a couple of countries around it, whatever. But there was a deal made here, okay? There was a deal here. Now, the Russians probably can see this, right? They're not stupid, right? But they have no choice. They have to play this war game, and the reason is because there's bait involved, okay? The bait is the Russian oil, okay? That's the bait. So the United States saying, hey, we want to play a war game, okay? And these are the rules, and you have to play, because if you don't play, okay, you're going to lose your oil fields, okay? Whether it's because one of these Ukraine or one of these other countries are going to go up there and take the stuff. But the Russian oil fields are the bait to get the Russians to play this game, okay? And as you can see, it's like, okay, well, you can have a pipeline, well, you can't have a pipeline. If you do what we want you to, we'll let you have one of the two pipelines. So you got a lot of that stuff going on there. So bottom line is that the Russians have no choice. They have to play this war game, because otherwise they're going to lose their oil fields. Okay, so this is my analysis. Again, looking at the shadow that the current events are casting. Okay, and let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree? Do you think I'm nuts? Whatever. But this is how I see it. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all soon. I'll give you guys a close up of this little thing I drew up here.